Hello everybody and welcome to this week's low carb lesson. Today we're going to talk everything about fasting, why it's so beneficial, and especially the top 3 mistakes that a lot of people make. And we're very, very lucky today to have Dr. Caryn Zinn to help join us. And we're going to be discussing everything about fasting, how to fast, why to fast, mistakes people make, maybe some cover up some myths and everything. But firstly, I really want to thank Caryn Zinn for coming with us today and spending her time to join us today. And I feel very fortunate to count Caryn as a very good friend and a professional colleague. She is an absolute world leader in the practice and the science of low carb and ketogenic nutrition, and for especially metabolic health and sports nutrition. So welcome, Caryn, and why don't you tell us a bit about your background?
Hi, Libby, nice to be here. My background, well, I guess I've been a dietitian for a long time, since the end of 1995. And then I promptly upped and left South Africa, where I trained, and came to live in New Zealand. And I went to the winterless North, Prekure, and I worked as a public health dietitian there for 4 years. And then in the year 2000, moved to Auckland as an academic, into the world of academia. And I have been a private practicing dietitian the whole way through. So really immersed in the area of nutrition from the word go. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, I'm at AUT. I've got a private practice and involved in a whole bunch of things, really, which will likely come up.
Books, aren't there? I think there might.
Oh yes.
Remember, I told you.
Yes.
It sits behind me.
There it is. Brilliant. Yeah. So I am part of the crew that has written the What the Fat series. So myself, Professor Grant Schofield, and Chef Craig Roger. And we've written What the Fat. We've written What the Fat Sports Performance. We've written What the Fast, which is very relevant today. And we've also only recently put out our new recipe book, which is Pure Recipes, What the Fat. Yeah.
No, everyone who's watched me for a while, they absolutely know. I always tell everyone they've got to get What the Fat and especially What the Fast. I absolutely love them. And everyone knows
I always tell everyone to go to your website. So it's a beautiful win-win relationship.
It's a mutual appreciation society.
It is, absolutely. And of course there's Prekure as well, which I'm involved in too. So the lifestyle medicine organization, Prevention is Cure. So I'm a part of that as well. So I think, every dietitian has lots of strings to their bow, and that's one of my strings too.
Oh, and again, I've just finished the health coaching course, so I've done all of that, and I'm now going through the certification for everything, and I'm doing the next level, the PK 200s.
Oh,
and I've absolutely loved every single one. So I highly recommend that to anybody out there watching to absolutely sign up. And I'll put some links below afterwards so people can join up and everything. So it's wonderful to have you join here today. And I've said this to Grant before as well, that you and Grant are the absolute number one reason that I can either blame or thank to be in Ditch the Carbs.
Yeah.
So it was many years ago that we met up at AUT, up at Millennium, and I went to some of your sort of presentations about low carb many years ago, and that's when it just really hit home to me there was just so many light bulbs. And I've said this before, but and I got to thinking, I got to researching, and I wanted to retrain. And there's no low carb courses there are now because there's Prekure, but there were no carb courses out there now back then. And then I started up Ditch the Carbs, so it's very much thanks to you and Grant, entirely 100%.
Gosh, those were the first workshops we did.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Really,
I remember them really clearly.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed them. So right on, let's crack on with about fasting.
Cool.
We'll split it into 3 things. So we'll talk about why you should fast, how to fast, and then we'll bust some kind of troublesome myths, because there's so much information out there and everyone does it their way, or there's all these myths kind of out there. So let's dispel the first myth. What's the difference between intermittent fasting and starvation, because they're not the same?
Yeah, well that's really interesting, and I think about that a lot, because a lot of people ask me that question, and I think really it comes down to the fact that with fasting there is a choice. You choose to fast, whereas starvation you actually don't. It gets imposed on you, really. And I think it's just really the situation or the circumstance that makes it different, because the physiology is the same. So if you fast for a day and you starve for a day, you're still going through the same physiology, but the difference is you choose to fast, and people who choose to fast need to make sure that they are making the choice for the correct reasons. And I think starving is something that just gets imposed, and of course you can't choose. If you're in a really starved out situation, you don't choose that, so it can often go wrong. So I think physiologically it's potentially the same thing, but sociologically it's quite different.
And I think that's a great point. And I also think that I always kind of think as fasting, it's a planned period without food, and you sort of plan your meals before and after to be nutrient dense. So it's not like starvation where it's quite often continuous or a continuous lack of food or whatever. We're actually planning it for a short period of time where we just don't eat the food during that period of time. And it's a pre-plan.
Sure. Yeah, sure. No, I agree.
And do you think when people start fasting, do you think they should be fat adapted first or low carb first before going straight on in?
Yeah, I think that makes it a lot easier. So I have met people who have said what they like about fasting is that they actually don't have to change a lot of their behaviors. If they're not ready to change their food, they can just fast. And I'm like, you can do that, but it's going to hurt. So I think if you fat adapt beforehand, it really makes fasting a lot more straightforward, a lot easier. In fact, fasting, and this is why we wrote the book What the Fast, is because it's almost the second natural progression from low carb. And when people become low carbers, like, well, I'm not that hungry, I kind of miss breakfast anyway. So they are already one step ahead of the game.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. It's that natural progression. So many people say, oh, I don't actually want breakfast anymore. That's never ever happened to me. I always wake up starving. And now they go, well, actually, do I have to eat? And I go, well, no, if you're not hungry, only eat when hungry and stop when you're full, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it is the next natural progression, isn't it? But like you say, if somebody just wants to go straight in, they could, but there's going to be pain with it, maybe.
It is. I just think people are going to feel really hungry. Their body is so not used to using fat as a fuel for any prolonged period of time. They are carb burners, for want of a better term. And when you stop eating as a carb burner, your body goes, right, okay, I think I need to burn a bit of fat now. Let me figure out how to do that. And that might manifest as hunger. It might manifest as feeling a bit grumpy or a little bit lightheaded, but you kind of push through if you know why you're doing it. So I definitely think it's a lot easier to be fat adapted. And I don't mean having to do keto. Fat adapted is really just going low carb to any degree.
Yeah, so you're no longer a sugar burner. You're going on the lower carb as opposed to the standard, what most people are having.
Yeah, so metabolically flexible. Your body knows how to use fat when it needs to use it, and it knows how to use carbohydrate when it might need to use it. And I think that's the most. I think that's should be the most popular terminology is metabolic flexibility. But I think we're only just getting there, really.
Yeah. And what would you say if somebody's never done fasting before and they've never even heard of fasting, how would you describe as maybe the main benefits of fasting? Why should we be fasting?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that we've just modernized something that's been around since the beginning of time, but we've modernized it quite well, I think, because now we've got the science that goes behind it. Fasting for spiritual reasons has been there forever and is still there and an important reason to do that. But I think, if you had to look at fasting and sort of categorize it into three distinct categories, you might go, there's intermittent fasting, so that might be missing a meal, missing 2 meals, and you might do that to improve your relationship with food. You might do that to manage your weight, to manage your blood sugar, to manage certain conditions such as inflammation. So those are some of the sort of first off benefits and reasons why someone might go intermittent fasting. Then your second category is your sort of short-term category. That might be anywhere between 1 to 3 days of fasting, and you would do that to get to tap into that longer term benefit of autophagy, which is cellular cleanup and cellular rehabilitation, if you like, And then your longer term fasting, so your advanced fasting, which is anything, above 3 days really. And you're talking, you're getting into your major kind of catabolic state at that point. So you're getting stem cell regeneration, you're getting a boosting, if you like, of the immune system. You are well into ketosis, and you're getting the benefits of being in a hardcore anti-inflammatory state. So you've got various reasons for doing it, and various health benefits across that spectrum of just missing a meal right through to missing a whole week,
Yeah. And you talk about autophagy, and that's obviously, it almost goes hand in hand with fasting. Can you explain, I guess, briefly what autophagy is, and do people know when they've kind of almost reached there? Is there a particular time that they should fast before it kicks in?
Yeah, it's one of those terms that it's a real buzzword at the moment.
Yeah.
And autophagy really, if you look at the two different, you always break a word up if you don't understand it. Autophagy, and auto is automatic, and phagy is related to kind of eating, appetite, and it's really when the cells get their own appetite really and eat themselves. So if you like, it is cellular cleanup when cells, they kind of get past their use by date and they need to move on, and you need to get ready for a whole new set of cells. And that is really autophagy. Now, people think that autophagy only just happens when you fast for lengthy periods of time. So while there is no magic number, you hear, and there's no research around this just yet, but you hear people bandy about 20 hours or 24 hours. If you fast for that period of time, you're tapping into some good level of autophagy. But of course, just being on a low-carb diet and just having small breaks, and also just exercising, you can actually have small amounts of autophagy happening, because of course something like exercise would be a catabolic process where you get some cellular breakdown, and that starts the autophagic process. So I think it is happening to a certain extent at various times if you have a break from food and you're doing other health behaviors like exercise. But I think we do know that the longer you do it for, the more benefit you'd get out of autophagy. So I would say, from what I have read and what I know, from 24 hours onwards, you'd kind of get into that maximum state.
So that's great. And let's talk about the most popular ways to fast. We've got the missing breakfast, we've got the 16-8, the 1 meal a day, all of those things. Which would be the optimal, I guess, do each of the fasts have different uses? Say, for example, like you sort of briefly touched on, one would be maybe for weight loss, or one will be for autophagy, or for brain health, cellular health. Is there a particular one, or are they for just general health? Which one would you recommend?
It's so interesting, because as modern life is, we tend to put a name to everything.
Yes.
And to market it, the 5-2 or the 16-8 or the OMD, and it's like it's while I'd love to say this is best for that and this is best for that, really where I'm at the moment is you've got intermittent fasting and you've got advanced fasting.
Yeah.
And I think you can make that decision right there and then. And if you go, I want to control my weight and I want to control my blood sugar, right, let me at least do some intermittent fasting. What should I do? What's going to be most beneficial? Well, that depends on what your goal is. How much weight do you have to lose?
Yeah.
What is your lifestyle like? Some people, the thought of missing dinner for them is horrendous. They've got families and they like to cook and eat with their family. Other people, it's like, dinner's so important to me, I'll miss it. So
Yeah.
I really, the way that I work with my clients is I work with them and negotiate what is the best time for you to miss a meal.
Yeah.
And of course, most people go, well, I'm so busy in the morning, I'm doing this, getting the kids up to school, going to work. And I kind of forget to eat breakfast anyway. So there you've already got your 16-8. And if you do that twice a week, there's your 5-2. So
Yeah.
it's really working with people based on what they can do. I don't think that there is any perfect protocol. not even the one that we talked about in our book. I mean, it's all guided by science, but there's no perfect protocol. It's really what's perfect for you. So there's a short term, and then longer term, we're getting into more cancer prevention, cancer management of conditions, and playing around really to see if you've got these hard chronic conditions that can see some improvement. Mm-hmm. And I also think that there are lots of people that do long-term fasts purely for weight loss, and that's fine too. But it's really up to what people are prepared to do, and also as a practitioner, what you feel comfortable working with. And I just don't feel comfortable, even if you've got 80 kilos to lose, I just don't feel comfortable saying, well, just don't eat for 6 months. I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm just not that comfortable. I'm way more comfortable doing an OMD 1 meal a day option. So it's what people are feeling most comfortable doing, and what you are most comfortable suggesting and supporting people through.
I think what you've done is you've explained it. It's you've got to be sort of pragmatic and practical about these things. There's no point saying, okay, everyone should do this amount of fasting, this amount of eating. That should be kind of more prescriptive to everybody, and works in with your lifestyle, your family lifestyle, your routine. Like you say, if people don't really mind missing dinner, or for me it would be, I wouldn't want to miss dinner, for the family.
Me neither.
And whatever works in, and make it sustainable. It's no point saying, actually, I'm going to do a 3-day fast every single month if you're never going to work it. And the other thing I would say to people, monitor how you are at the end of the fast. If you suddenly come out of the fast and think, oh my goodness, I'm starving, and you just go for, 3 packs of cookies afterwards, you'll know that fast was too long for you, and you need to make it shorter or whatever. So hopefully that's would fly by with your advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that sometimes practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And for a 3-day fast, you've got to be very clear why you're doing a 3-day fast. And if you don't get that refeeding right, it might not necessarily be that the 3 days is too long, but it might be that you just need to refine those processes after 3 days. I mean, I've done one 3-day fast, and I plan to do 2 a year, and I haven't stuck to that because I enjoy it? I don't know if enjoy is the right word. I was not hungry. I was hungry for 15 minutes out of 3 days. True story.
Wow.
But and when it came my time to eat, I could have actually, it was in the evening, and I could have actually flipped over the next day and done 72 hours or whatever it was. And I decided that I wasn't going to, not because I was hungry, but because I was psychologically ready. And I felt a little bit psychologically damaged. 3 days not eating, and it's a really, really weird thing, not being hungry, but feeling a bit sort of psychologically compromised. So if you don't know, and I was very clear why I was doing it, so I was never going to break that fast. But you've got to be incredibly clear on why you're doing it for it to be optimal.
Yeah, exactly right. And what's your opinion on, you hear a lot of people talking about clean and dirty fasts. What are they, and what's your opinion on them?
I haven't heard of dirty fasts. Can you tell me what
Dirty fasts, from what I understand, is that you can fast, but you can still have things like your diet drinks and other things that don't have any. I kind of see dirty fast as almost like a cheating fast, but for some people who can't do a proper, I consider fasting, the gold standard is water, but then whatever I often tell people, if you have to have tea and coffee throughout, if that means you can sustain it, then that's better than not being able to do it. And I think from dirty fasts, from what I gather, is that it is people doing fasts who couldn't particularly do the gold standard, but they do it with their diet drinks and other keto bits and pieces in there. So I personally wouldn't go for the dirty fast, but I go for what is sustainable.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to why you're doing it again. If you're doing it to improve your dietary behaviors, then dirty fast doesn't really align with that philosophy.
No.
If you're doing it just for weight loss, then that would be fine. But then again, you do have to put everything into perspective.
Yeah.
It is interesting because fasting according to me is actually nothing going in apart from water.
Mm-hmm.
So, but even what are the rules? The rules are made according to who you talk to. So even in our What the Fast, we say exactly what you said. We say have some tea. If you want to have a coffee, you can have a coffee just with a dash of milk. That's not fasting technically. You're having a little bit of milk. But if you're going to not do it because you can't have a coffee, you'd rather do it to experience it and have that coffee. So I get that. I mean, I think that clean fasting is way better than dirty fasting. But to be honest, I think if someone's willing to make some changes, you support them, and you make sure that they at least dirty fast properly, if you know what I mean. So
and also it might just be, I always think, I always teach everything stepwise. It might be the sort of just the beginning that people go, oh, actually this was great, but next time I'm going to do it a little bit better, or just take that next little step. And you talk about breaking the fast. What do you think is the best thing to break a fast? Some people say, and it's true, if you have anything, like you say, the gold standard is not eating anything, just having the water. But some people also sort of, if they can't continue right to when they planned, they would maybe have some fat in there, or they'll have a bulletproof coffee, or they'll actually fast drinking bone broth. But technically, all of those are breaking a fast, depending on how you define the fast, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think bone broth is one that I think all of these things you can do over a lengthy period of time. But if you are doing a short, sharp fast, it's like, why do you need that stuff anyway? Particularly intermittent fasting. If you're missing breakfast and lunch, just have water or have a herbal tea or something like that. Whereas bone broth has got a little bits of protein in it, and that will tap into the physiological processes in the body that signal growth. And the whole point of fasting is to get that catabolic or that breakdown physiological mechanism happening, because you've got eating is important for growth, and not eating is important for that rest and digest and breakdown. And it is the synergy of the partnership that is most important. So I think we just need to be a little bit careful what you put in, like drinking bone broth all day. Calorie wise for weight loss, great, but if you want to tap into the high level benefits of fasting, maybe not.
Yeah, because it's technically, like you say, it is technically having protein, and it will be breaking the fast. And what would you say is a good food to end a fast on? Would you advise fat to end a fast, or a small piece of protein?
I just think have your normal meal, which comes up when you break the end of the fast. I think there's a difference between intermittent fasting and longer term fasting, and I think we need to be very, very cautious when it comes to longer term fasting, because you get something called refeeding syndrome, and refeeding syndrome is something that can be quite fatal. It can be fatal if you are affected by it. And it's really when you're getting all these nutrients in, and physiologically it just doesn't gel with having everything stop for a prolonged period of time. So we're talking anything over around 5 days. If you're going to break your fast, you want to break your fast on something light and something small. So I always say, start low and go slow. Have a small amount of food. Like a bone broth would be really useful over there, or even something gut friendly like sauerkraut, or something light like some kefir or yogurt, or something just to say to your stomach, your digestive system's had this massive holiday, and you don't suddenly want to give it, a roller coaster ride. It's probably going to be a bit upset. So a little taster here and there. But if you come off a day's fast, or even a 2 days fast, or even an intermittent fast, just have your normal meal. But I will say, just don't overeat. That is one of the biggest problems that I see. The biggest issues is that people overeat. Because of course you haven't eaten for a while and food tastes pretty good. And of course, I don't know if your experience with fasting, but actually fasting when you start fasting, it's actually quite easy. But when you eat, that actually stimulates your appetite, and that's when you want to eat more.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of a double-edged sword there. Yeah, you've got to be very, very mindful about not overeating.
I tend to plan mine very much like What the Fast book, and I even have it scheduled on my phone, and it will beep at me on a Monday and a Tuesday fasting to remind myself. And I kind of plan it. I mean, some days it doesn't work out. Some days, my husband's working from home, so I have lunch with him. But generally, I plan it that I don't have anything, and then I just have my regular evening meal and then start the next day. So I've mentally just blocked myself out. It's just the evening meal and no more. Otherwise, if I didn't sort of have it already planned in my head, then I think it could be easy to then think, right, I'm going to have dinner, or I haven't eaten all today, then I'm going to have a few snacks, then I'm going to have something else. And
you're on the money. You're on the money with that. It's that balance. I find it's that balance between thinking about it and not overthinking it. And I know that sounds like a real disconnect, but I think if you plan ahead, the mind is so sharp and so powerful. And if you plan, this is what I'm going to have on that day, and I've sort of got it organized in my head, the rest of the day I'm not going to have anything. You've talked yourself into it, talk yourself through it. That's the rule.
Yeah.
Don't have it. And again, for people who find that really hard, it comes all the way back to stage one, which is, why am I doing this? And if you're not entirely sure why you're doing it, well, then you're not going to do it properly. And if you're pretty sure why you're going to do it, then you do it.
Exactly. So let's talk about how to do it properly. What drinks and electrolytes do you think that people should be keeping? You see all these different things that you should be maybe making an electrolyte drink, or do you just have to make sure you keep your fluids and having some salt?
Yeah, so I think intermittent fasting, anything up to 24 hours, you just got to look at overall hydration. So people forget that when you eat lots of vegetables, a little bit of fruit, and we eat anything, foods hold water. So when you're not eating anything, you've got less water. So just make sure that your hydration status is good. I don't think for an intermittent fast you have to worry about anything else. I think only when you get to 2 or 3 days do you need to start thinking about things like sodium and other electrolytes. I do think that sodium is really, really helpful for people who feel a little bit lightheaded. And you can either you can drink salt water if you want to, but I tell you something that I did in my 3-day fast was actually get a little bit of rock salt and put it on my fingers and just eat it, which is just bizarre, eating rock salt, but it was very satisfying. One, it took away a dull headache that I had in literally 45 minutes, gone.
Wow.
And secondly, it was quite cathartic eating something.
Yeah.
When I wasn't know how to eat, it was just salt. But
just the physical act of doing something.
Yeah, you could have said that was cheating. Maybe I don't know. But it's only when you're doing those longer term fasts, like over 5 days, do you need to start worrying about things like magnesium and like a whole sort of complement of electrolytes with potassium, sodium, magnesium. And then the big question of, well, what about micronutrients? What about vitamins and minerals? What about, we've got our recommended daily intake, our RDI. Surely, you'll go silly if you don't get those every single day. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called recommended daily intakes. And to be honest, the answer is, and I should know this as a dietitian, but, I don't. There's no protocol that says after this amount of time you have to have whatever. When you look at the literature, it takes around 14 days or so without having a certain micronutrient before you start developing a deficiency. If it was me, and I really only guide people in this respect how I would do it myself, and I think if it was 5 days or more, I would start taking a general multivitamin, multimineral. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother, and just make sure that you have that salt and fluid.
And it goes back to, you were saying before about the whole ethos of us living low carb. As long as we also live our meals in between the fasting are nutrient dense, low carb, and as nutritious as we can make them. It's not like we're eating, junk food and then we're fasting and then we're nutrient deplete anyway to begin with. We're eating really nutrient dense meals all the way along. So, like you say, we probably don't need any supplementation unless it's a very, very long fast.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I don't put people off who want to supplement, because I think supplements for most of us are a just in case, a bit of an insurance policy, unless, of course, you've got cramps and you take magnesium and the cramps help, or you have something and you have iron deficiency, you take iron, and that, something that's diagnosed and that you need. But, there's some people think that when they do eat, their calorie intake might be a little low. They're not convinced that our soils are rich enough in nutrients, and they just feel that they want to take some kind of supplement. If they've got the money to do it, then absolutely, by all means, go for it.
Insurance theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's bust some myths that are out there, or answer some problems that are out there. Do you think you've seen some people, they fast too long and too often?
I do. I absolutely do. And we've got this mentality that if one is good, then two's got to be better.
Yeah.
And I think people can get into some problems doing that, and it's really linked with how you feel, with what your goals are, and cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which kind of creeps up in the most sinister way. And I think the best advice I can give anyone about fasting is you have to be introspective, and you have to be reflective, and you have to listen to your body. And, honestly, 10 years ago, if somebody said to me, you've got to listen to your body, my eyes would have rolled. I would have said, God, that is so cliched. I mean, what does that actually mean? I don't know, maybe that's age of maturity, but it is so important. Like, you don't know yourself, you've got to get to know yourself with every area, whether it's food, exercise, sleep, how you converse with people. I mean, you've got to know yourself, because until you know yourself, you don't know what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And
exactly.
if it doesn't feel good,
the whole point of doing fasting is to improve our health, improve how we feel and how we think and how we function. And when you're doing fasting, if something is out of whack, something's not right, that's not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to be the best version that we can be of ourselves, the best health version we can be. And if suddenly fasting is not doing that, then it's too much too fast. And do you think that people can fast too much? And does that actually, this could be a big myth out there, does fasting slow down weight loss and affect metabolism? That's a big, big question people always ask.
Yeah, I think one of the big things to think about is, if you're fasting a lot, you must have a good reason for it. And if it comes to weight loss, you've got to have a serious amount of excess body fat to lose to warrant fasting a lot. I definitely think, the evidence out there on fasting for prevention of things like cancer, and fasting during chemotherapy and all that kind of stuff is very specific and therapeutic. And we don't actually have enough evidence to say, what about me? If I want to ward off cancer, how often should I do my 3-day fast? Because if I do a 3-day fast once a month, I'm going to lose a lot of muscle mass. I know that. So it comes back to, you will lose body fat, which is great, excess body fat, but you likely will lose some muscle if you don't have a lot of body fat. So you've got to, and even if you do have a lot of body fat, you will lose a bit of muscle. So there's a real trade-off. And you've got to find the balance between the benefit of losing body fat and the detrimental impact of losing a bit of muscle. And, if you were grossly overweight or obese, you might go, I'm okay to sacrifice a little bit of muscle because this is really working for me and my health is improving along the way. But other people, not so. So it's those people who, maybe people who are like recreational athletes, people who are just trying to live as healthy as they can. They go on and just lose the last 5Ks, and they just get into a little too much fasting. So whether the metabolism, just to answer your question, whether the metabolism goes down or not, look, I think there's not enough evidence to guide us there, but there is a little bit of evidence to say with long-term fasting, like 20 days, and more, yes, your metabolism does slow down, and that could be and is likely related to the amount of muscle mass that you might lose during that period. So again, you've got to weigh it up.
Okay, so it's really connected to the muscle mass as opposed to the actual act of fasting on the body.
Well, I think so. I mean, look, if you're not eating, your metabolism is not being kind of fueled. So there is going to be some kind of slowing down, because of course when you eat, your metabolism is kind of active to burn through all your nutrients. So, in the old days when we used to say eat for breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, after dinner 6 times a day, what a mistake that was, to keep your metabolism up. Do you remember that? I used to say that all the time.
I remember that a lot.
Metabolism up. What does that mean? Until I saw some research that showed that actually if you eat breakfast, lunch and dinner, your metabolism does drop in between, but it just picks up as needed. So when your food needs to be metabolized, your metabolism then goes, hello, I'm ready. But I think it's when things go wrong. So if there's a high stress individual, or if there's any other kind of ailment where your hormones and your neuroendocrine system is a little bit messy, then your metabolism might take a little bit of hit. And I don't think it's because of fasting, but fasting might make it worse.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly right. And is there anything, any basis in the myth that people often say about fasting and thyroid function?
Yeah, so again, there is no evidence actually to show that fasting is beneficial or detrimental to thyroid. And you might see some people say, well, actually, when you fast, you get a drop in some of your thyroid hormones. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're developing a thyroid problem. It just means that there's less of them being produced to function or to do what it needs to do, because there's less food being put in and needs to be processed. So I think the whole thyroid thing is interesting, and I'm not always convinced that if the numbers don't quite align with the thresholds and the lab test results, that there is a problem. I think that there is a problem if you feel off.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to knowing your body. And of course, in connection with the numbers, if you feel off and your numbers are off, then let's look at what's going on. But it could be that the functional thyroid hormone that you've got is doing what your body needs to do. And if you feel good while you're doing it, and you truly listen to your body and feel good, then there's nothing wrong.
Exactly. So if your thyroid numbers, even if they do change a little bit, if you're not symptomatic, there's not feeling anything right, then it's absolutely fine to go.
Yeah. Sorry, just to one last thing. I do hear people talking about losing my hair's falling out and all that kind of stuff. And I have had an example of that happen to a couple of people. And the one person it happened to, she'd had this horrendous motorcycle accident, and she was in really bad shape, and she just wanted to drop a little bit of weight. So I counseled her through low carb, and she thought that, well, if it was low carb, then keto's got to be better. So she dropped her carbs right down. But not only her carbs, she dropped her calories right down. And I think this is the most relevant point here, is that thyroid can be affected when you drop your calories down suddenly.
Right.
And that's why fasting is kind of implicated. Her hair started falling out, and she was like, this is not working for me, and blah, blah, blah. And she was a bit sort of antsy about the whole thing. But I think when you take things into your own hands and things go wrong, that's the time to get some help with a health professional who can say, well, I think a little bit of fasting would be good for you, but a lot won't. So it's so I think just putting that thyroid thing to bed, I don't think fasting to the level that you need and that's going to be beneficial for you is going to harm the thyroid. In fact, some people find that they feel better. So it's just really coming back to doing what's suitable for you.
Okay. And so and one other question for you about myths, what's your opinion on carb cycling? I hear a lot of this about whether you should, fast for a little while and then you have a really high carb day. And there's from what I've read, there's conflicting advice, opinions, studies.
Yeah, I think there's more conflicting advice and opinions because I haven't seen the studies, that's for sure. There was one guy a while ago who wrote this book, and I read it. It was all about carb cycling, and it was all about getting big in the gym and the anabolic effect of eating late at night. And he would advocate like a bit of intermittent fasting and eating really cleanly, low carb during the day, and then after your exercise session, you just basically, now that's an example of dirty carbs. You just eat whatever you want. Go smash the pizza and smash the ice cream. I'm like, seriously? So it was like, I stopped reading that quite quickly. But there is no protocol, and I think where carb cycling can be very beneficial is for athletes who look at their and recreational and elite athletes. They look at their program and they go, some sessions are a bit harder that they do, some sessions are a bit easier. Sometimes they just need a little bit more carbs, sometimes they need a little bit less carbs, depending on what they're trying to do. So I think carb cycling can be quite useful there. I think a high carb hit. There's one study that I've seen that has shown that it can be helpful to come off a weight loss plateau. Right. So if you're coming down and then you plateau and you go, I'm doing everything right, what's going on? There is a little bit of evidence that if you have a high carb hike for a couple of days, and it might actually not even be high carb, it might be high calorie. Mm-hmm. But because you haven't been eating carbs, it's like, well, let me eat more of this. So it's a high calorie day, which kind of gets you off, and it might be an indication to your body that it's actually, you're fine, so you can get off that hump and lose a little bit more body weight. So I'm not sure if I've been that helpful with that answer, but I think carb cycling is something that people are just making up as they go along, and I mean, it's kind of cool because it is finding out stuff that works for you, and of course it works with people's lifestyles too. And if they know they can have a higher carb day, it's like, great, I can throw the potatoes in. Awesome.
And like you say, it's just a bit of self-experimentation. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then don't do it. It's with all of this, it's that simple, isn't it?
It is that simple, and I think it's important. I was telling my students the other day to find out what really works. I'm not sure the context really, but to find out what really works for you. You have to fail at some things to know that doesn't work for you. Yeah. Obviously, within reason, depending on what it is. It's a road, and you've got to navigate between various things to find out what's optimal. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on the fast mimicking diet? Well, I hear this a lot as well, that it's very low calorie, very low protein. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it could be a marketing tool. Like, I know the only fasting mimicking diet out there is actually, you got to buy this and take these. So I think having a ketogenic diet is as fasting mimicking as you can get to, because I think, and the other thing which I forgot to mention earlier, a lot of people fast to actually get into that state of nutritional ketosis where they have that brain clarity and that sort of neurological fertilizer going on with ketones. So getting into ketosis through diet is quite tough, but getting into ketosis with not eating is easy because you're just not eating. So I think the fasting mimicking diet is sort of in between there. Yeah.
And you briefly touched on about, getting into nutritional ketosis. Is there a place for exogenous ketones? Is that more for the people who finding it hard to get into ketosis, but they want the neurological benefits of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that area is going to boom the next few years. What we don't know is whether the benefit metabolically comes from ketogenesis, so making your own ketones, or just drinking them or eating them. So I think the jury's still out on that. But I think where it could be particularly effective is in that neurological area, particularly for people who have things like Parkinson's, dementia, brain cancer, and the conditions that might require that you be in a deep level of ketosis, but it might be really hard to get you in there through diet. I mean, can you imagine working with someone who's got Alzheimer's or dementia, but they don't have the support around them and telling them to count their macros?
Yeah.
I mean, it's too hard. So I think, and I hope there are going to be some formulations that in preparations, like hospital-based formula and things with ketones in them that are specifically therapeutically for this purpose. Yeah. But when it comes to controlling blood sugar, maintaining weight, all those kinds of things, it's like, don't waste your money on exogenous ketones. Spend your money on good quality food.
That's exactly what I say. I say, don't waste it. It's no point being and having these exogenous ketones just so you can test that you've got ketones in your blood or in your breath or wherever, because you actually want to be in nutritional ketosis. You know, you don't just want to have them just so you can test positively. You want the benefits from it.
Yeah.
But I say the same as that. I say, do not buy supplements. Do not buy the exogenous ketones. Save your money and go buy some salmon or some good quality meat or
avocado.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you get the keto chasers. I want to be in ketosis. Why?
Yes.
Because that's what I'm meant to be doing. So
exactly.
Well, actually, not necessarily.
No, you don't want ketone levels for the sake of it. You actually want to be in nutritional ketosis, and you've got to that place where your body is there. Yeah,
for sure.
Excellent. Well, look, let's wrap this up. Let's talk about, what do you see, especially in your private practice, what do you see as the 3 most common mistakes maybe that people would make when they fast?
So the biggest one, without a doubt, is making up calories. So people think that if they miss a meal or if they miss 2 meals, then by having, one meal a day later on, you'll be in calorie deficit, and that can be the case, but it's often not the case, because of course, when you miss a meal, you feel quite righteous, and you go, I can just get away with a little bit more. And of course, when you miss a meal or miss 2 meals, you go, well, food tastes really nice, so they make up calories. So if you're not fasting and you're not losing weight, you're making up calories, or you've got a very, very high stress environment and there's more going on that you need to look at. So that's the one. The second mistake is people lose sight as to why they're doing it. And again, the minute you the minute you falter in what you're doing, it's bringing it back to that, why am I doing this? Okay, that's why I'm doing it, therefore I need to stay on track. It's that knowing your why, another lovely cliche term, which is incredibly powerful. And I think the third one is that people get fixated with numbers, and they're just not intuitive enough. And I guess it's very personality driven. And if it's at 18:06, it's like, right, I've got 8 minutes left, and then I can eat. It's like, really? But you can't change people if they are those kinds of people. No. If they are, I'm doing it till 6 o'clock and that's whatever. But I think if they can drive them and motivate them, that's great. But I think sometimes they can unravel people. Yeah. So if you get too fixated with numbers to the point that you go, oh my God, this is too hard, it's not going to wait. It's not going to work. I think whatever fasting people are doing has got to be doable long term. Otherwise, what is the point? So,
exactly.
Those are my 3 things.
We've kind of said throughout this, it's got to be sustainable. It's no point setting yourself, this is the goal, and then either you falter at the end and you overeat, or you falter at the end and you go, I didn't make that last hour, so I failed. And just kind of, I try and plan it from Monday and a Tuesday, but say if my husband's at home, I will have lunch with him, and it's not the end of the world that I have lunch with him. And if we go out as a family, I may not plan to fast, but if there's nothing when we go out to, say, a cafe and there's nothing I want, I go, well, actually the easy option is just to sit with a creamy coffee, and I don't feel deprived at all, because it was my choice not to have it.
So let's put a name on it, because people do. Let's call it intuitive fasting. Yeah. You heard it here first, you and I. Come on, intuitive fasting.
We'll quickly trademark it and copyright it.
Yeah, trademark it. Yeah. That'll be a real challenge for some people, but I think that's the best way.
Yeah, I think it really, really is. And it, like you say, it just, some people love numbers and they like being regimented, and that's brilliant. That works for them. Other people do kind of what it does, you know, whatever works for you and in your situation, and go with that. So now
Yeah,
to
for sure.
really wrap things up, I've got 3 questions. You know, I always get to ask my guests 3 questions from my members, and it's, they absolutely love having the sort of, you know, their hands on the guest experts that I can invite in. So the first one is, I've been reading that autophagy is also initiated by lifting weights. What's your opinion of shorter fasts combined with weightlifting to engage the autophagy process for the good of health?
Yeah, well, your read is on the money, because I even mentioned that earlier, that exercise can actually accelerate that autophagy process. There is one study that I know of that has been done on fasting being able to be anabolic. So if you have a fasting window and then you have a workout, because you've got that natural increase of growth hormone and adrenaline or epinephrine, you can get some kind of stimulating growth environment, and then you do your workout and then you eat after the workout, and together that process can cause anabolism or muscle gain or muscle growth. Of course, there are more things in there that you need to get right, such as enough protein to grow muscle and enough calories later in the day to grow muscle. So we're not really talking about body fat loss from an overweight person. We're talking about, if you want to get those gains in the gym, you want to have a little bit of body fat loss, a little bit of muscle mass gains, you can definitely do shorter term fasting to make it work for you.
Excellent, excellent. And my second question is, I think you've probably answered this already though, do you need supplements during fasting? And I'm guessing what the answer is.
And the answer is?
No.
No. No, not intermittent, not short term.
No. And my third question, and I think this will apply to a lot of people here, she wrote to me and she said, help, I fast Monday to Tuesday, I eat really well throughout the week, and my weight drops during a fast. Then it slowly creeps back up, so the net effect, obviously during the week, is 0. What do I do? Have I reached my metabolism, or do I need to fast for longer and more often? I only have 4 kilos to lose. So I thought that was a really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, without knowing more, it's quite hard, because if you've got 4 kilos to lose, like how that could be someone trying to get into quite a low weight range, or it could be someone coming off an overweight weight range to get into a healthy weight range, and there's quite a difference there. But if I would say that losing weight during the week, that could be a water loss thing. But I guess if you are fasting for weight loss and you're not getting that weight loss, then the overall calories for the week are not as low as they should be to enable that weight loss to happen. So I know the low carb community are very, very much into calories. It's not really about calories, it's about looking at carbs. But I think when it comes to the last 4Ks, calorie, and you're eating well, low carb, whole food, but of fasting, calories absolutely count. So it might be that you need to look at the calories on the either side of your day, on the either side of your week, and reduce those, or you do slightly more fasting, or what's the stress situation, because cortisol can create an environment internally that's full of sugar. And that will prevent weight loss. So all of these things need to be kind of carefully looked at. And if this person is absolutely stress-free, oh, that would be amazing. If there's really not an enormous amount of stress, then it's just a calorie thing.
Yep. Excellent. So I think that's perfect. I love those questions, and you've actually answered them beautifully. So thank you very, very much.
Good. You're welcome.
So that's been an absolute brilliant talk, and I've really, really enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone watching today will absolutely love it. And I will put some links below for your website, your Facebook page. And what about if somebody wants to see you for private practice? How do they go about that? Because I know a lot of people would love to come and see you, I'm sure.
Yeah, so that's great. I work in a clinic in Northcote, but of course, you work via Skype, so you work with everyone around the world if you need to. So you can get to me through my carynzinn.com or carynzinn.co.nz, and there's a contact page, and you can just come through there, and it's all there, really.
Excellent.
It's easy.
Well, I think anybody who contacts you will be very, very lucky to come and have you look after them and tend to them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Caryn. It's been absolutely wonderful and delightful to talk to you. And I think everyone will have really enjoyed this today. Thank you very much.
Great. I hope it's been very helpful. Thank you.
It has. Okay, bye.